very grand music, and I have to say, Nigeria, it's very hard to follow your amazing speech. I was rapidly taking notes and sending quotes, and also when you said something about manels, I was very quickly scanning the agenda, being like, we don't have any manels, do we? But rest assured, our wonderful team would never allow that. So. Anyway, good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Irene Liu, and I am the Director of AI, Emerging Tech, and Regulation at the International Fund for Public Interest Media. It is the longest title ever, and I don't expect you to even remember it. Anyway, it is my pleasure to be the moderator of this session. And with me, we have people who you have already heard from, and for those of you who have seen any of the videos or participated in previous Control-J convenings will be familiar faces. Starting from the end, we have, of course, Michael Markovitz from the Gibbs Media Leadership Think Tank and our host, co-host for today. We have Wahyu Dhyatmika from the Association of Cyber Media in Indonesia. And we have Paula Miraglia from Momentum Journalism and Tech Task Force in Brazil. And as Inkarote mentioned, we spend way too much time in person and online together talking about these issues. And so really looking forward to essentially basically giving you all a preview, kind of a look back of how we came here, how we ended up here, and also what we are looking forward to, and kind of what's top of mind and what we've learned over the past 2 years, and especially over the past 6 months. So with that, I'd love to kick off with Michael to give us a preview of what we're expecting for the next 2 days, and also a reflection on where we were in 2023.
Well, firstly, Nigeria, it's a tough act to follow. That's why we invited you, because we knew you would be. It's a bit self-defeating, but I know that you've sparked so many thoughts, and I think that it helps ground us in a bit of reality and a dose of a sense that things are a lot tougher for us than mere theories and struggles can actually imagine. And I think it's great that we've been grounded like that by Nigeria to start off with. Look, back, as I said in my opening, back in 2023, we were just
trying... Do you want the slide? Do you want your slide?
It's my slide, could help.
Yeah.
But I'll just kick off with the 2023. We called it Big Tech and Journalism, Building Sustainability in the Global South. And you notice we've evolved. We've dropped big. So we call it tech and journalism because we think there's maybe people find there's a judgment call on big, but the reality is we're talking about large digital platforms. And I think that is a non-value-driven term. And the reality is that we felt that we had a role to play to bring people together to really try and think about what should be the principles that should shape any negotiation. Those were the days when the Australian News Media Bargaining Code was the flavor of the month. You'll remember that, Richard. It was the model that everyone was looking to. And as we know, things have become a lot more challenging. Not everything's worked out. Not everyone's followed Australia. Canada's had its challenges. California's looked at things. And we've been looking at it and go, well, we're not really getting much guidance that can be applicable to our continents and with our very real structural inequalities. And so we drove these principles, and we were very chuffed that about 100 odd organizations adopted them. And then that started this process of trying to gauge how can we start driving the debate from the Global South, but also engaging these incredible development organizations that are involved in the space, because we don't believe that anyone's got the monopoly of knowledge, and we do believe in collective wisdom. So that was really the thing that shaped us from the beginning. And I'll leave it there. I'll hand over to you, back to you. I mean, I've got a few other things to say, but generally speaking, the program was designed to focus on sustainability broadly, but also what we cannot forget on the African continent, and our colleagues will deal with it, is the fact that out of out of the whole continent, if the World Press Freedom Index is anything to go by, only 4 African countries meet satisfactory press freedom on that index. Whatever you think about that index, I think that is a problem. So, you know, we're trying to look at these issues, and Nigeria also referred to this. We need to still deal with the basic freedom of expression issues, and that's why we've got a panel on that today. We don't want to leave those issues behind as we talk about AI, tech, and emerging technology.
Great, thank you. Next, I will ask Wahyu. No, sorry, Paula. Paula, to give some remarks as a reflection of the Control-J LatAm conference, which we had in March, and also the many things that have happened in the 6 months since then.
Yes, thank you very much, and good morning, and I'm glad to be here with my comrade in arms to talk about all these issues. If I could have my slide. But I can start. So Momentum Journalism and Tech Task Force is a think tank based in Brazil, a global think tank focused on the Global South. And because I often forget to say so, we publish a lot of policy briefs about what's going on in Brazil, but elsewhere in Portuguese, English, and Spanish. So if you want to know about what's going on in Brazil, please visit our website. I always forget to say that, so I started to start by saying that. So I wanted to bring some reflections about not only what happened in our LatAm conference, but also what we have been learning in this process, and what is a conjunction about learning, luck, and geopolitics, and how all these things are coming together right now. I would like to start by saying that the winds have changed. So what is seen now is very different from what we were seeing 1 year ago. And I think this is a combination of Global South leading the way, as Michael said, on many fronts. And I think that regarding to democratic safeguards, regulatory efforts, even technology development, we have now Brazil approving not only bills regulating tech, but we have our Supreme Court approving also legislation regarding platforms and platforms accountability. We have a situation between Lula and Trump that involves diplomacy, economic matters, and directly involves big tech platforms as well, and platform accountability, which all of this generates a different level of public awareness. And I think that we need to notice that, because one of our struggles is also to explain and to mobilize society in general to take a closer look to what we have been saying. So I think that we need to take advantage of this new public awareness moment, knowing that even if the winds have changed, they won't stay like this forever. So it's up to us to make the best of this moment and also to keep the conversation going this direction. I think the other thing is, what we learn here is to also be very clear about what we want. And I will say that we want everything. And we need to want everything. We need to want regulation. We want remuneration or compensation. We want funds. We want licensing agreements. We want to sue AI companies. We want everything. Why? Because there's not only one solution, and we need to open every single door that we can. We need to be, as we like to say in our group, opportunistic in a good way, and we need to be able to, we need to have mapped all these opportunities and be working in all of them. The other thing I want to say is that narratives matter, and they matter a lot. Stories shape what's possible, and we've just heard brilliantly about that. So I believe that platforms and the far right, intentionally together or not, have created a narrative that any sort of regulation equals censorship. Also, that regulation brings a lot of risk, as if the present was perfect. The present is far from perfect. And we should, how they say in Silicon Valley, break fast and fix later. Why can't we adopt that from themselves? We're sure going to make mistakes, but the present is very imperfect, and regulation can change that. So we need to think about that as well. There is a political science concept about policy entrepreneurs. They choose one narrative to keep repeating over and over. We need to decide what we want to repeat over and over and over in order to convince the public, our Congress, our governments, other civil society feuds. So what's our story? And let's start to repeat it. Our key strategy, be always ready. You don't know when things are going to happen. So, no, the political environment is not very open to discuss taxation. It's going to be tomorrow. It's going to be next week. We don't know. A bill is going to be voted next week. We don't know. We need to be ready. So we're doing research. We're working with different allies. We need to be ready when the opportunity presents itself. Yes, we can. Together we can even more. So if you're a publisher or if you're studying media or if you're from a media development organization, you've been dealing with traffic apocalypse along the past 10 years. So when Facebook announced that it would prioritize posts from friends and family, when Google changed its algorithm, when Twitter decided to change its policy, and now with Google AI Overview, we're seeing a true traffic apocalypse. So Google said that is bullshit. Their words, not mine. So we need to raise data from our countries. And of course, it's powerful if we bring data from Brazil, but it's even more powerful and even more unquestionable if we're bringing data from Brazil, from Indonesia, from South Africa together. It's really hard to say it's bullshit if we're presenting this together. So we definitely need to work together. Also, our markets are extremely relevant from an economic point of view. Brazilians are WhatsApp crazy. When Fernanda Torres was nominated for an Oscar, Instagram found the power of Brazilians, fans. So we need to transform this economic relevance into power, and we can do this by working together. Finally, and I'll come to an end. Let's not survive, let's reimagine. I think that I don't need to speak further after we had this brilliant keynote speech. But I think that when we've been in a crisis mode for so long, it's very hard to think about the future when we're thinking about paying salaries if you're running a newsroom, if you're trying to protect your journalists if they're being sued. But I think that with AI, even more, it became imperative for us to think about imagining the future and how those who don't imagine cannot build. So we need to engage also in imagine our future, and we need to have a vision for our industry and not react to the innovation that is imposed upon us. Finally, I think I would say find your people. When you work with journalism and technology, we lose often. I would say that we lose all the time. So we need to work with allies that can inspire you, can show you a different way, to whom you can complain a little bit and come together again. And so we address that as a detail. I would say that this is a key element of our work. Work together, find your people. I found mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paula. I feel like what you just said ties back to what Nanjira said about the tyranny of now and what it means to own your own narrative when we're constantly reacting. I feel like we're always reacting and everything is changing all the time. I will now turn to Wahyu to give his remarks, and then we'll go into a little bit of a discussion after.
Thank you, Irene. Good morning, everyone. Salam buona, karibu. I think that's what I was told to say. It's good to be here. My name is Wahyu Dhyatmika. I'm from Indonesia. I think my sole task here is to bring you up to speed to what have been happening in Asia Pacific in the last CTRL+J conference back in July. Yeah. Times flew. I think it's important to have this update in every beginning of the CTRL+J conference because we want this to be a Global South conversation, and not everyone can be present in all of the events. But I think tying all of these threads together is important so that we can come up with a more concrete and more comprehensive dialogue each time we do the next phase of the conference. So the conference in Jakarta was attended by, I think, more or less the same number of participants. It's about 150 participants from 13 countries in Southeast Asia. We have from East Asia and Asia Pacific. We had more or less the same numbers of speakers. On those 3 days discussion, we agreed that there are at least 4 areas that we need to work together in order to anticipate and mitigate the impact of AI tech to our media ecosystem. Those 4 areas are the business sectors, the technology, the content, the news production, and the legal and regulation framework. So the discussion during those 3 days were around those four areas. We heard from a lot of experts on the legal framework needed to make sure that we can sit down with the tech platforms, with AI platforms in particular, to discuss compensation, to negotiate an even, a fair playing field between publishers and platform. In Indonesia, we were lucky because last year, maybe some of you have heard that we have a presidential decree on platform responsibility for quality journalism, which act as a foundation for negotiation. So it doesn't really give us an exact amount or an exact way to get the compensation, but it at least enforce platforms to sit together with publishers in Indonesia. So we talk about also the bargaining code. We have some speakers, a speaker from Australia. We talk about how do we explore ways in copyrights and anti-monopoly law. And we heard from also the South African Competition Commission. In the technology area, we heard from a researcher from Brazil, Sergio Spagnuolo, about the robot TXT implementation. We had a survey among more than 2,000 Indonesian publishers, and we found that less than 5% have robot.txt script on their website, which shows the very low awareness among online publishers about the importance of getting their content protected, giving the right signal to AI bots, what is allowed and not allowed to scrap the content. We had a research now ongoing, and I think some of the preliminary findings found that I think 20 to 30% of traffics to websites, to news websites, are bots. They are no longer humans, so 20 to 30%. And we have to serve those queries, we have to pay for the servers, and we don't get anything as compensation from the AI bots. So we talk about that. We talk about how do we protect our content, our news content. So the easiest way is look at the already exists infrastructure. We talk to Cloudflare. There's some representative from Cloudflare, from OpenMind from the US about that. We also come up with a agreement to have a login mechanism in all of the members, all of the association, our association websites, so that we can start building first-party database on our audience. In the business and commercial areas, we heard from Pramesh Chandran from Malaysia. We heard from Sui Fang, and the importance of building a homegrown local language model on top of our content and our database. We have to experiment and explore different products. We have to reimagine the information ecosystem in the AI era, and it will take a lot of product development and learning. Last but not least, we talk about, on that area, we also have a local unicorn talk to us at the panel, Sahabat.ai, and they are building Bahasa Indonesia language model. They have an agreement with 4 publishers in Indonesia, a legal agreement to have our content as part of their training models, and we want to build on top of that so that we can create a new product for our audience. Last but not least, in the content production, we heard from Sui Fang and other speakers about the B2A2C model, which now may be quite new for a lot of us in the newsroom. It's about building content for AI platforms. So we need to standardize the format, the structure, to make sure that it fits to the needs of the platforms. And we also heard a lot of experiments happening in newsrooms, and how do we make sure that AI tools are enhancing the quality of journalism and not degrading it, and make sure that we keep our audience needs and users' engagement on top of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Wahyu. And I'll just make a quick plug that we are currently still working to put together all these videos and have them subtitled from the previous conferences. You can already see the videos from the LatAm conference, but the APAC will be coming shortly. And of course, we will also make the ones that are available from this conference available online as well. Before we go down and deep, I'd like to actually go wide first and talk a little bit about some of the themes that you said in terms of the geopolitics that are affecting what's happening in this space at the intersection of journalism and technology. Michael, you mentioned the Press Freedom Index, and of course, everyone has talked about the issues of copyright and the use of content and what it means from the legal and regulatory framework. In July, in São Paulo, at the BRICS Summit, leaders of the 11 largest emerging economies signed a joint declaration that included commitments for the future of AI, calling for open source AI development and compensation for content creators. I'm just going to quote directly from the declaration, because I think it's useful for us to talk about this. We recognize the importance of collaborating on promoting respect for intellectual property rights used in the digital environment, including for artificial intelligence training purposes, as well as fair remuneration to right holders while respecting the needs and priorities of developing countries. With the rise of application of AI, we recognize risks relating to misappropriation and misrepresentation of knowledge, heritage, and cultural values that are insufficiently represented in data sets and AI models. Now, if you look at the composition of BRICS, it's quite interesting, right? Because you have the countries represented here, Brazil, South Africa, Indonesia. You also have countries like China and Russia and others. And I think I'm quite interested to hear from the panel your reactions to the tension between, on the one hand, press freedom and democracy and freedom of expression, and also respect for copyright, because it feels like, encapsulated in this, you have, some things that we in this room probably like to hear, but also whoever's saying it, there are also questions as well. So would love to hear sort of your reactions and also how to place this in a world now where the conversation around copyright, digital services, taxation, and other things are also tied up in trade wars and tariffs as well.
She looks like our friend, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, like geopolitics. I mean, really?
So go straight to it.
Yeah. Look. Also, it's noteworthy that the African Union is a member as well, and I think that I do think that we have to be quite agile in how we approach these things, because while different countries have different freedom protections and some not at all, we can't just, those that are democracies in Africa can't wait for the others to catch up on the press freedom side before we tackle these key issues. So that's the first point. But at the same time, we need to still keep them together, try use our, one of the points I wanted to make is that the value of these Control-J conferences is also bring in the region, because I know that you both did that. And we want to bring this discussion to the African Union because we also believe, from the geopolitical point of view, yes, South Africa may be a big media market, but you can see what's happening to us. I mean, some may argue it's got absolutely nothing to do with anything except South Africa's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice, and that's being used as a stick to punish us with everything. And I think that's pretty true. But ultimately, the tariffs are not really about trade. They're really about political punishment. And South Africa can't stand alone. I mean, we need the continent to be standing with us. It's quite tough. A lot of the economies are pretty weak and vulnerable already. So for me, standing together on a south-to-south basis is important in this new geopolitical context, and we take a lot of comfort and respect from your president, Lula, standing up. But we also don't know how this is going to end. I made the point the other day when we were discussing the outcomes of the M20 to say, what's the EU going to do? You know, we're looking at these global south countries. But if the EU, as one of the strongest economic blocs in the world, caves, what signal does it send to us? Whatever signal it sends, I think we still got to try and push for it. But I think those are the realities, Irene, that we're confronting, certainly in Africa. And that's why the need to bring these discussions to the African Union. And I know there's a lot of people like Guys involved and Alison, AI strategies on the continental level, but bringing those governments up to speed so we can stand together with a common strategy on the continent to deal with these issues.
I think we saw some opportunities as well with the geopolitical situation. That's why in Sao Paulo, in Jakarta, and now in Johannesburg, we always invite the government representatives to come. And they start talking to each other. So government, the Ministry of Digital from Indonesia is talking with Mr. Joao Brandt, the minister, what's his called? It's a secretary?
National Secretary.
National Secretary for Digital in Brazil. And hopefully we'll have a meeting between the government officials tomorrow. So I think on that national level, the government see an opportunity to have the global south represented by democracies. Brazil, South Africa, and Indonesia are democracies. So I think that's also create an opening for us to come in that.
Yes, and I believe that it's important for us to watch this as a diplomatic process. So if we go back to when Brazil had the presidency of the G20, it was already a negotiation to come up with a declaration that included information integrity. And that wasn't already easy because it's not every country is comfortable with this idea, but is it an idea that is gaining traction? So I think and it impacted also how the Global Digital Compact was negotiated as well, at least, or how it was kept as the way it was imagined. So I think we're talking about the processes, and of course, I don't know if the BRICS declaration would have included that if we were during the current geopolitical context. So it was a statement that it is, from my opinion, immediately connected to the other conflicts that are going on among these countries. That's why I think it's important, as Wahyu was saying, for us to not only work in a civil society sphere, but try to bring our governments together in the kind of fora that we're creating here, but also for us to have this perspective of what are the big processes and how can they impact the work we're doing on the ground. And I think that this connection is key for us not to be 100% dependent on them, but also able to take advantage when they happen.
Thank you. Now going to equally challenging and unsavory topic, which is how we fund innovation, how we fund these efforts, right? Everyone wants to talk about sovereign AI, sovereign tech, owning our narratives, owning our own words and our knowledge, right? And not having it extracted or co-opted. But all of this requires resources. It requires compute, chips, data centers, and money, to be completely blunt. So the question then is, how do we find resource to do this? How do we actually find a way? If for journalists, it's interesting because many times when we are talking to those in newsrooms, they're trying to make payroll for their staff. We're still at that. It's existential at that level. Journalism may not exist anymore if the people who do the work can't get paid to do the work, right? And then meanwhile, we also want to talk about these, kind of longer term, systems changes. How do we get where does the money come from? Does it come from development? Development is sort of those budgets have decreased. Is it indigenous funding and homegrown funding? How do we make those arguments? What are the arguments that you would make to try to convince those who can write the checks to write the checks?
Well, I think it can't just be one source of funding. And I think, when I talked about the sort of what are the alternatives to regulation? I mean, our belief is that there's only been better resourcing or responses from the digital platforms when there's the threat of regulation. And it's been incredible to see that, sometimes that kind of collaboration negotiation starts when there is a potential that there could be regulation. And someone did a study once that the amount of grants to countries from the digital platforms, Meta and Google in particular, was directly proportional to where there was the biggest threat of regulation. So you had Canada, and it was the US first, and then Canada and Brazil. And I don't think that's any coincidence. So if one stood back and said, well, let's sit back, everything's going to be fine, I don't think that's a good approach to actually get in terms of the platforms. But I do think governments need to come in as well. We'll hear from regulators later today, from the Competition Commission particularly. They propose various mechanisms like media funds, like potential digital taxes, and I'll let them speak for themselves. We've been very involved, like some of you in the room, in that process, and we're quite keen to see how that's going to end up. But I think, Irene, just in short, I don't think it's one source. I mean, obviously, IFPIM is one of the players in the resourcing of and obviously there's so much you can do. I mean, the world is huge and the needs are great. But we need to not look at one, magic bullet. There isn't one. I think there needs, and that's why I said there has to be multifaceted solutions. I really believe that without leadership development, how do you negotiate with a lot of these companies? People are trying to digitally innovate and transform their newsrooms, but often a lot of the leaders of those publishers don't necessarily have the negotiation skills or the resources. So maybe we also need to think about resourcing professionals to assist in those negotiations, because that's what we're after. We're after negotiation, collaboration. As I said from the outset, it's not just about confrontation for confrontation's sake. We want to be across the table and to have a seat at that table.
In Indonesia, we are in the middle of building a journalism trust fund. Several of the researchers who researched the feasibility of the trust fund are here. Shout out to Wendra and Professor Masduki. So we hope that the trust fund can become a donor mechanism to kind of synergize all of the potential fund that Michael just mentioned. So I think there's a potential there with that new mechanism. But I think more important than that is the networking and the ability of the stakeholders within the country, the media stakeholders, to really agree on what are the priorities, what are the steps that needs to be taken, and the roadmap to achieve that. So I think once that are quite clear, I think a lot of funders, a lot of potential source of fund will see this as a good way to change things to the better. So I think we need to do the homework within the countries to make sure that we have an achievable goals and we are synergized with all the stakeholders within the country.
Yes, I would separate. I think first, there is inspiration from different countries that could lead to innovation very fast. I think that what the South African Competition Commission is doing is super important to feed our negotiation strategies, and there's a lot to be learned there. And I envy Indonesia for being able to develop their own LLMs, and I think this is the kind of knowledge transfer that we should definitely invest in. I also think that for us, it has been a strategy to work with different sectors of the government. So we, of course, work with the Digital Communication Secretary, but it's important for us also to work with the Finance Minister, because they are the ones discussing how data centers will come to Brazil and where and all that. And this is definitely a conversation that interests and matters to all of us. There is a new, I think that part of what I've been calling new public awareness in Brazil is that you have now investors talking about digital national sovereignty. We need to take advantage of these opportunities as well. I think people finally understood that when we're talking about technology, we're talking about the future of our country. So you have people that, and we know that media is a sector that hasn't been able to attract traditional investors. So let's use this opportunity. It's not only about the journalism industry, it's about the relationship between tech, journalism, and the public sphere. So it's up to us to make a better case about that. I think there's a lot of not a lot. There's some innovation that doesn't necessarily involve a lot of resources. So recently in Brazil, we had a bill that was approved, and this approval of the bill, it concerns tech platforms and is not directly linked to journalism, but it is linked to children's rights. So this approval, and you can find a brief in our website about that. This bill was, the approval was triggered by a 1-hour video that was produced by a famous YouTuber in Brazil. So he talked about what he calls adultization. So he talks about inappropriate content on social media platforms that concerns children and adolescents. It went viral, it became huge, and I think that many journalists might have seen this as competition. But let's think how this guy made this video. He made this video with our research, based on journalism and scientific research. So maybe we can think about him and people like him as our distribution tool. I think there is innovation there as well. Like, how can we bring together these two dimensions? So I think we can think about new forms of doing our work without necessarily spending money. And finally, I want to talk about philanthropy. I think that we talk a lot about innovation, but when it comes to philanthropy, we need to talk also about consistency. I don't know how many of you work with philanthropy and how many of you have followed the change in strategies that happen on an annual basis on a lot of philanthropies. We need consistency because the work that we're doing takes time. So, and we need also a bigger appetite for risk. We're not going to get it right on the first time. So we need philanthropies to be on our side, to understand that the work that we're doing is very experimental. It will have risks. It's not going to always work, but you need it to be on our side because this is, I imagine that philanthropy is born to be like this. So let's approach philanthropic funds from a different perspective as well.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question, then we'll open it up to the audience, which is about business models and standing on your own 2 feet, right? I think that this is an important question that we face. A lot of times the conversation is about, well, what can we get from, in terms of development aid? What can we get from philanthropies? What can we get to support this work? I think sitting here, we have essentially 4 continuously working journalists and other people who are, kind of dabbling back and forth in journalism to and fro and doing other things. There's sort of a defensiveness around what journalism is and how we preserve it exactly how it is now. What are you seeing as potential opportunities and models to actually build businesses that are able to sustain moving forward in this space?
Before I answer that question, I forgot to mention also tomorrow morning we'll have Professor Vukosi Marivati talking about African large language models. And I think it's very important to just follow on what Wahyu said, just to highlight that there's a presentation. He's in Geneva at the moment, has prepared a very interesting video presentation, which I really encourage everyone to be here on time for. Just to say, my colleague Stili Charalambos, who's not here today, but he is CEO, founder of the Daily Maverick, and also my colleague who we co-launched the Media Leadership Program. He says often, and I think it's worth repeating, that journalism, public interest journalism, has shown that it has value for society, and that's why we're trying to encourage people to see that kind of journalism as a public good. Okay, but it's not funded like other public goods. So when you talk about business models, Irene, I'm not so sure there's a magic business model in a market failure situation. Yes, some people will be able to innovate. Some people have got membership, subscriptions, advertising, different types of ways of supporting themselves, but it's always a mixed model with a bit of philanthropy thrown in if you're lucky or privileged enough to be able to access it. So I think the problem with the business model concept is there a business model that is sustainable for journalism when it's seen as a public good? I'm not saying that all forms of journalism are necessarily public goods, but public interest journalism certainly we feel is. So I think that's where governments come in. You know, that's where governments have to say, well, if you're a democracy and you're not able to support media, because obviously it's a real challenge to convince many governments, and democratic governments included, that they should play a role in supporting the media, and we know the challenges that can go wrong with that kind of approach. But we've seen many models around the world where there's incentives, there's tax incentives, there's rebates, certainly easier things than necessarily in parallel to what the Competition Commission is doing. So yes, there are ways of surviving in this very difficult world for journalism, but I think that the business model, there's market failure, and in market failure, the business model is elusive.
So I come from an association of publishers. I'm publishers myself. We have approximately 500 online media in our membership. I think the first thing that comes to mind in my board when we think about the business model is the numbers of media in Indonesia is just too many. So we need, I think first of all, we need to consolidate the media ecosystem. I think we've been doing that in the last few years. We try to create a platform to aggregate of the content, because if you talk to AI platforms, there's a positive in the volume, in the aggregated volume of content. So we are really looking forward to see how we can create a mechanism where revenue sharing can happen, profit sharing can happen fairly within the media who agree to join the integrated platform at a certain point in the future. In terms of the product itself, I think we are experimenting with different product. I think we are now doing a research, an audience research, to see how audience are engaging with AI and what are the capacities in our membership in terms of using the AI tools. We are experimenting with different frameworks to channel the news content to AI platforms, and I think all of those experiments will eventually, give inputs to the kind of product and to the kind of value that we want to give to our audience. So I don't have the answers right now, but we are working on it.
Noteworthy is that all of the solutions that you're suggesting are collaborative.
Yes, all of it, because the consolidation needs to happen. Of course, there's big media in the capital that doing good on their own, but 70% of our members are local, small media with less than 10 employees, 10 journalists. So I think we need to find a collective approach for a lot of our members.
So I think there are several issues. I'll try to, I think first I would like to say, I think that crisis is not an excuse to do whatever is needed in terms of advertisement. I have a huge problem with that, and I think that what I'm seeing is that we cannot give up ethics because we need to pay the bills and do whatever it is in terms of advertisement. I must share with you, like Brazil, 700,000 people were killed in Brazil because of the pandemic, and some of our biggest newspapers published an advertisement about a medical treatment that wasn't scientific approved, and it was sponsored by a medical association with clear political alliance, with an excuse that editorial is separated from commercial. I think that when you're a publisher, you have a responsibility, and I think that the fact that we're in crisis has put people into a mode that okay, but we need to pay the bills, so whatever. And I've heard that here in South Africa, some things similar have happened, and I'm sure that elsewhere we're seeing this kind of debate. I think that there are different issues related to business models. I think that one is, Wahyu has talked about market fit, and I believe that our industry needs to approach that more seriously. We need to do research to develop our products. So we've been finding out, for instance, that there's a node research done by Luminate that pointed, for instance, that young people, particularly young men, get like not news, but information in general in the gaming sphere. So if this is actually true, how can we bring news to that? It's not about, when I read that, I said, okay, I'm going to develop a game. And I talked to someone and said, don't do that. It's going to be boring. No one is going to play. So obviously, I don't even know what I have a story about Minecraft that I repeat, not even knowing about what's Minecraft. So I'm not the person to develop a game. But maybe I'm the person to think with someone else, how can we take news to the gaming sphere? So I think this is a kind of exercise that we need to make in order to reach these audiences. I think also we need to work more with the idea of blended finance. IMS has just released a report on that. So I think the mixed capital has been working in different areas. Why can't we think about that concerning journalism? We definitely need public policy because not all media organizations are economic viable, and it doesn't mean that they don't need to exist. We have markets that are really challenged and they're not commercial viable, and they are entitled to have a plural, strong media ecosystem. But I think this is a relevant conversation because of two things. When we talk about licensing, we don't expect platforms to be entirely responsible for our existence, financial existence. We only want what is fair. And it's not the entire money that will sustain us, but we want what is fair. And the second one, having this experience myself, we don't want to be 100% dependent on philanthropy. We want philanthropic money. We don't want to depend on them. So I think this is definitely a conversation that we need to have, considering all these dimensions.
Thank you. I think at this point, I'd love to open it up. If anyone has questions, if I could ask you to please introduce yourself first, and then ask your question. And we have about 12 minutes, so I think we can take a few of them. I think I saw the person in the back first, and then up here up front, and then we'll go to Guy, and then Richard.
Thank you so much, Irene. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Moore from Deutsche Welle Academy. I want to say I'm really impressed after we started the conversation on Monday, but I'm more and more impressed every day that I hear you three talk of this important alliance that you've been building, and also to IFPIM to support that. So when you said, Paula, find your person or find your people, and that you have found your people, that gives me hope. So your alliance also gives me hope, as an organization also working on this topic quite a lot. My question to you is, do you have a plan or an idea of how to bring this important alliance forward? Beyond maybe the global wrap-up, I think, that you're planning, but what are your next steps to keep this going?
Should we have a...
Yeah, I think we can answer quickly. Just we'll be succinct.
Okay. Thanks, Laura. I think when I talk about that, I also talk about this community. And I think that we've been meeting and exchanging, and I think being very honest that we also need to face that we are going to difficult times also in terms of funding. And this can create a very competitive environment. And we should not in any way allow this to get in our way. I think that collaboration should be, it only favors, it doesn't favor our goals in any way. So I think that we should put collaboration as our main goal. And I think this is how we can broaden this alliance. And this is what we've been learning. And I think not only these conferences, but these conferences have shown us that bringing a larger community together is where we can actually get things done. So I think this is the vision that we have here. So.
You've answered.
Yeah, don't forget there's another conference in Kuala Lumpur in November. I think that will crystallize all the conversation. And I think to bring this forward, we need success story. So I think we have identified the problems, we have mapped the issues. Now it's time to really develop the network, develop the product, develop the business model. I think that's we want to achieve.
And I think that one important thing is this is a very serious and nerdy community. So we've been now producing a lot of research, a lot of documents. I think one important thing for us would be how can we coordinate all that? So I was talking about what's the idea that we're going to repeat. We should look into all the documentation that is very valuable that we're producing, and how can we make this something that is very strong that could feed all of us. So this, I find it's extremely strategic.
And if I could just say, I think for us as IFPIM and working in partnership so closely with not only the people and organizations represented here, but also broadly with the community, we believe scaling research, sharing methodologies, not repeating and starting over from scratch each time is an important opportunity, and one that is relatively low cost. I think in-person convenings are expensive, but so important. So we want to continue that opportunity. And we do think that, we want to find opportunities to, again, be opportunistic, support it, not duplicate what other people are doing, and also provide support. Sometimes a little bit of funding, a little bit of allyship can take something that's already happening and kind of take it to the next level. And so we want to be able to support that broadly. I will say that at least for this effort, we are myopically focused on the Global South. That is where we are focusing our efforts, because we can't solve for the world. We want to be focused. We want to be focused on this very narrow intersection of where technology is taking us, the sustainability of media and journalism as a practice and as an output, and how we can ensure that everyone can benefit from whatever this new state that we're going to be in our market. So just really focused on geography and also this very narrow part of the larger kind of issue that we're talking about. Up here.
Thank you for the opportunity. Hello, everyone. My name is Gordon Matonga from Malawi. I'm with the Media Institute of Southern Africa. I wanted to pick on something which Paula mentioned in her preamble about the issue of regulation. Basically, I wanted to ask about when we talk about regulation in a form of regulating the tech platforms, are we also unintendedly inviting also regulation for the media space itself? I'm asking this because I think for the majority of the Global South, we're also facing this challenge, the question of whether the media should be regulated by the state, or we should be just using self-regulation. So I just wanted to see if there's any possibility of unintended consequence of asking for regulation for the tech platforms. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say, as I think, it was directed to you, sorry.
No, but please, it's always actually.
I think the way I look at it is that I believe that content should be self-regulated. I don't believe the state should be involved in regulating content in any way. And that's why there's a big initiative, I know, with the media councils in Africa, where trying to take the model of a self-regulatory media council where people become members of voluntary codes, and that code has got a role to play in terms of people being able to take complaints. Fortunately, there's nothing like that with relation to the platforms, but I think we need to differentiate between that type of regulation and the regulation one is talking about here, which is probably economic at its heart, but also pro-competition, and also in terms of indigenous language systems, the need to protect it. I mean, we had no problem in the 90s following on Australia and Canada in putting in local content quotas for our broadcasters. There was no problem. Everyone felt that that was a best practice. Things have moved on from a technology point of view, but that principle still remains. And I think that's where you can have regulation to promote indigenous content. But I think we're very cognizant of the fact that we don't want the state to be involved in deciding what's good content, what's bad content, what's allowed or what's not allowed. I think that should be left to a more self-regulatory framework, in my view.
So I think there's a, as Michael was saying, I think there's a distinction, an important one. Not always it's possible to get it perfect. And I think there are many risks there. So when we are talking about regulation, they're like the content regulation, we're often talking also about compensation. And I think this is important not to, to separate that and not lose sight of that. So in many cases, like some of the bills that were presented in Brazil, when it comes to journalism, they were talking about fair compensation for the usage of journalistic content to feed platforms. But of course, for instance, in this bill that was recently approved, there is a whole issue about encryption, data privacy. So regulation comes with that reflection as well. And when our Supreme Court in Brazil approved a change on our internet bill, the content issue, it made platforms accountable for content as well. So it changed the accountability regime. There's a brief on our website about that. It explains precisely this tension. But the problem is that the regulation that we had, the legislation that we had before, wasn't sufficient enough to what internet is today. And what we need to think, from my perspective, is what we used to call the free internet, the open internet, has changed as well. The digital market has changed. So we need to have legislation that is updated to that as well.
Great. Guy?
Thank you so much. I won't identify myself because it's too confusing. Why you said that you found that people do not use the robust.txt on their websites, the publishers. So some research found recently that the AI crawlers ignore the robust.txt anyway. So this brings me to a related point, which that Donald Trump said when he was announcing the US AI strategy, that it's impossible to work out a payment mechanism for individual websites that are being scraped by AI bots. And at the same time, we've seen Cloudflare come out with saying they have a mechanism with a lot of different codes that people can put in their websites that can require payments. So he says his motivation is that he's worried that the web is going to be extracted so much that nobody will have any incentive to put content up, because there's no direct recognition or traffic or anything else. So my question really is with yourselves, what do you think about this Cloudflare initiative? And will you invite them to Kuala Lumpur? Because it seems to me this is something that could address at scale the extraction of content, especially from small publishers.
Thank you, Guy. There was one representative from Cloudflare in the CTRL+J conference in Jakarta, and we invited them to come to Kuala Lumpur. So hopefully they'll come. But Cloudflare is just one option to regulate, to frame the relationship, the engagement between publishers and AI platforms. We've been piloting another framework called OpenMind. It works as a mechanism to create data sites within the websites, so that the scraper don't have to come to the website disguising as visitors, but they will come to another channel, and through that channel we can measure, we can try to see what content are being scrapped, and then hopefully we'll be able to evaluate the pricing strategy for the content. There's also another mechanism called Flex Olmo. We've been discussing that as well. So there's plenty of options that we are currently exploring, but we are fully aware that robot.txt itself is not enough. It's been ignored, but at least for publishers' interest to have that in place shows that they are aware, and legally they can show that it is protected and you're entering our premises without our consent.
Can I comment
Yes,
on
of
that?
course.
Yes, it's amazing to be like sitting next to Wahyu that knows, like, has so much knowledge about technology. I think that also we need to consider what we've learned in the past 10 to 15 years, which is media organizations received a lot of the technology that came from tech platforms as presents. So like, oh, the audience monitor, all the CMS, they weren't gifts. They basically created a structural dependence relationship between us and the media platforms, and a relationship that is marked by a huge asymmetry of power. So we need to look into the solutions as solutions, but we need to have a say, we need to have our own vision, and maybe we need to start developing our own solutions. Because I see this, yes, we are excited about this, there is possibilities, but we need to be able to keep some agency, the word of the moment, and have choices on this regard, not to repeat the same mistakes.
And I'll just say that I think that the open source movement in this moment that we're in is an opportunity. I think the awareness of governments that they need to invest in homegrown tech, homegrown platforms, and the fact that we're at a moment where users are going to change their habits. They're changing their habits. It's in those moments where you can kind of go in and be part of that change in habit, but it requires us to move fast. And I think that that's really the kind of agita that we all feel day to day, which is like, we know this is going to happen, and there's an opportunity in a moment before things ossify again for another, whatever. When did Facebook come out? 2006?
2006.
Yeah, another generation essentially. And I think we're at time, and Nkorote has stood up, which means that I think we need to end. I'm so sorry, Richard. I did promise, and then we have 2 more questions. The question is, Nkorote, are we allowed to take, or are we no?
It all depends. Do you want a tea break or no?
Have a shorter one.
Yes. And I think we can find each other during the
Okay.
tea break. As Paula said, we can find our people.
Okay.
So
Richard, you'll get a chance to, you're giving a provocation, so you can incorporate your question.
yes. So thank you so much, Irene, Paula, Wahyu, and Michael. Thank you so much.